Tech Insiders podcast. Today we have our insiders, Laurie from Oushinery.
Hi.
Jonathan from Bottlebooks.
Hello.
And Seb from Troly.
Good morning, boys and girls.
We're going to dive into wine heists, how to steal wine, how wine has been stolen, some of the greatest heists in the wine world, and how you would steal wine today. But before that, I think we have a hot topic that we might keep going back to, and that is the supply chain crisis. There is a good article in The Buyer by Richard Siddle, and he was talking about Emmanuel Olivier from Hildebrand was talking at a Wine Australia seminar and did a pretty good recap of some of the big issues. And I'll just cover them quickly. The freight rates are increasing. There's only a 35% chance that deliveries will be on time. There's a 13 to 15% growth in the demand for containers, record profits for shipping companies. So somebody's making money off of this. And like always, people are blaming a lot of it on the US and the ports in the US. And in fact, in Los Angeles, there's a lineup outside of Los Angeles with 100 ships waiting to get in. And on top of that, oil prices are high. So it seems like everything's coming together. Laurie, what do you think about this? What have you heard? Are wineries worried? Have you heard anything on the ground? Or?
So I think, when we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, it was starting to really bubble at the surface for us at Oushinery, almost hearing cause maybe changes. And now I think 3 weeks later, we are seeing it in action. So obviously we're not privy of, the full detail of the shipping issues that wineries are having. But right now what we see most issue is glass, getting glass bottles in place, to just bottled or ship. So we see a lot of our clients requesting, well, actually we need to update a bottle image because we are not capable of getting that glass shape anymore. Or we used to have this custom engraving on the shoulder, the blazon of the winery, and the glass factory is so backed up and nothing is coming out. So it just, this year, this vintage is gonna have none of the special glass. So we're really seeing this last minute tweaks. We're seeing as well, it starts to influence a bit what wineries are actually putting out there. They thought they were going to be able to release such and such wine, and they're actually, we haven't been able to bottle a reserve Chardonnay with just roll up to your estate. So that's, they're doing last minute shift. So it looks like a lot of juggling and uncertainty. So I really feel for the wineries, for us, we're really right now seeing it mostly on supplies to get the wine out, more so than the shipping of the wine. But I have no doubt that it's happening as well. I've been hearing that because the profit for shipping companies is getting containers from China to anywhere else, they actually don't want to waste any time refilling containers can be empty. We can sink the cost of getting back to China or anywhere empty, and we'd rather do the China anywhere in the world as fast as possible. That's where the money is. So even if you get things, somehow you have the truck driver, whatever, to get to the, to get shipped, sometimes cargo ship just leave empty. just empty containers to just come back faster. So it's just a bit heartbreaking. I've heard New Zealand is starting to have serious issues. So that's.
I wonder if on a global scale, I wonder how much we're going to see the prices of imported, exported wines vary. Because we know, for instance, in North America, you can definitely import wines at a pretty decent rate from Europe, generally speaking. Now that the containers are, it used to be about, $2,000, $1,500, $2,000 for a 40-footer container. It's now 20 grand plus. So clearly it's going to have an impact at some stage, or who's going to be absorbing that, because it might also help the local economies a bit more, right? So wine is one of the few goods which are produced outside of and brought in and consumed in.
Yeah.
So I think it might have an impact ultimately.
I'm almost wondering if, again, like there's, I don't want to call it a marketing play or something like that, but just like putting an hypothesis out there. Imagine that for a while, like there's just no New Zealand wine that makes it out of New Zealand. So maybe, obviously it's not happening or anything like that, but maybe like in 2022, like that's the year coming, like it's just like it's really hard to get your hand around New Zealand wine because it's not there. Almost then could 2020, I know it doesn't work fully like that, but could 2023 be almost like a marketing ploy from Wine of New Zealand if for 2024 or how long it takes to resolve? I mean, like, you've been waiting for that Sauvignon Blanc for Oyster Bay forever.
Right.
Here it is. And like I'm almost wondering if at one point, like this is not going away fast, right? So it's just like, is there a way to just kind of like weave it in? You've been missing it,
Right.
like capitalism, right? Like what this short demand is. Like your short supply is in high demand.
Even on the local scale, right? So when you look at last mile delivery, when you're looking at wineries delivering directly to their consumers or retail shops delivering directly to their consumer in a certain vicinity, Troly is integrated with 18 different shipping carriers, and the 18 of them, 100% of shipping carriers already have sent a notice saying Christmas are we going to bleep this? Christmas is fucked, right?
Yeah.
So we've been telling the wineries, try and do your club runs, try and send your Christmas marketing earlier rather than later, because the whole idea of saying you can buy until the 20th of December, we'll have it shipped before Christmas, that's likely to be very difficult this year, right? So yeah, overall, there's a number of different challenges, and I think the industry is fairly capable to adapt to challenges. But at the same time, as consumers, we need to get used to not having access to a certain product or not being able to have something shipped overnight, right? No thanks to Amazon.
What about this relationship between producers and retailers? So Jill Barth, who works for Oushinery, also wrote a great article in Forbes and quoted Austin Beeman, Vice President of Marketing at Cutting Edge Selection, saying, the retailers and restaurants that have sold those wines are now selling something else. Once you lose the placement, it can be difficult to get back. Jonathan, what about that relationship between retailers and producers, and in the context of everything that's happening now, trying to get new wines in front of them? Is there a lot of upheaval going on, especially for the big retailers?
I think it's absolutely the case. I mean, you have relationships will get you quite far in the industry, and I think it got a lot of people through COVID and had them a sort of a light at the end of the tunnel, just because it was also hitting everybody to some extent equally for a while. But then as different countries have come out at different paces, that's become a lot less even. And also businesses just needed to start meeting customer expectations as the customers started returning. And at a certain point, business will start to take a priority. So it's not surprising to have people say, we're going to stock what we can, or we're going to stock what's available. And we love having that wine on the menu, but if we can't get it, we're going to bring another one, and then our customers are going to get attached to that wine. So it's going to be, it's ultimately the customer comes first, and that will drive changes if the wine's not available, for sure.
Product placement, right? Overall, once you have a relationship, it's much easier to continue on that relationship. And I think there was, some of you might have seen Australian exports of wine have gone down 24% last year. And look, it's a quarter less, right? It's a significant decrease. And it also means that all of this, the market that has been lost internationally, regaining that market is going to be a lot of work, a lot of phone calls, a lot of trade shows, a lot of trying to push the Australian product back on the shelves, back in the restaurants, right? Because I agree, ultimately restaurants need to keep on operating, and they're going to try and find something else. will kind of, unfortunately, as an industry, there's an oversupply. So retail shops will find a replacement. Restaurants will find a replacement. May not be as great, as special, as unique, but we'll find a replacement.
And Jonathan, what are wine events looking like for 2022 to get that back?
Yeah,
what's the plan?
I mean, with the logistics, that just the logistics is even have an impact on wine events, especially when moving larger amounts of wines. That used to be done by sea pre-pandemic, and so you would for like pro wine, you'd make sure it was in the container by mid-December, and that way you knew it was going to be able to be unpacked and delivered to pro wine and to your other events in February and March on a reliable basis. And all of those sea shipments have been replaced with air freight. So it's for a number of regions, it's a complete, like, they've just had to also adapt just to make sure the wines are there when the producer shows up for the show. And I think for events, there is I don't think we have seen as many events planned for a time of year as we see coming up for the spring. With the storm clouds, with the COVID numbers here in Europe, it's hard not to sort of see a bit of deja vu, but that hasn't stopped the push to get back out there and to reconnect with people that you haven't seen in the flesh for 2 years. So there's this really pent up energy to get back out there. At the same time, we hear also, a resignation as well from people that they know that not all the events they're planning are going to actually happen. So there is almost a bit of let's plan a few extra, because we know that not everyone's going to happen. But it's still that energy to get out there and reconnect with people. It is strong.
Well, I mean, if you can't get your wine shipped to you, you can always go and steal it. So this is what happened in Spain.
Nice.
When a man, when a woman with a Swiss passport in her 40s, wearing a wig, accompanied by a man, walked into a Michelin star restaurant, Atrio, in Western Spain, and stole 45 bottles, including 10 Chateau d'Aquiem, the oldest being 1806 at a value of 350,000. This is, Laurie, this is kind of movies kind of stuff, isn't it? I mean,
it is totally movie. Like, it's just like maybe like Gal Gadot and everything will just be playing her like in the Red Notice 2, like the Netflix movie right now that is not good, but is actually like top worldview chart. There's always something strangely appealing about Heist, right? Like, they're obviously doing something that's illegal, stealing, but also as a viewer, it's not impacting my life. Like, they're stealing, something like maybe like a gold reserve somewhere, or in that case, wine. But 45 bottles, at first I was like thinking, okay, like, it's not, we're not talking containers of wine. But when you think about it though, like, it's also not something you can just like pluck under your arms and keep going. Like, it is a couple of cases to move out, like, so strong arms, like, it's just, but it's fascinating. And it's also obviously like a bit sad as well. Like, just curious to see like how, so how does it get sold again? Like, what is, like, how do you get this very rare wine, to be bought, enjoyed, invested again, whatever you want to call it. Like,
I can definitely confirm there is a black market for wine, and there are a number of really, really high net worth individuals who will just snatch that bottle and just actually buy it for sure. Yeah. It's actually something which has been identified in Quebec a number of years ago, give or take 10 years ago, the SAQ started recognizing that there's a lot of illegal imports of wine in Quebec that was bypassing all of their import system. And so I kid you not, when someone who's got money, when they want a bottle, they're going to get the bottle. So someone who has a bottle and needs to sell it, or they're going to have a really good party on the weekend.
Is there any technological way to prevent this? Are there any solutions?
There's been a number of in the past, a number of discussions around how to authenticate the wine, right? Having a seal of authenticity that is really hard to duplicate. We've seen some blockchain style provenance tracking effort with a varying degree of success shaping up over the last few years as well. We've also seen stuff like, what was his name? Rudy Sour Grapes in the US, right? Who apparently was so good with his palate that he could copy the wine and mix other wines, and fine wine connoisseur would buy it and really think it's the genuine thing. So it's nothing new. Whether we're going to be able to, I don't know, have a molecular signature of the product, I don't know. I also don't think it affects most people, right? It's really a very niche, very small segment. Yeah.
No.
Well, there was a man in Southern California who stole 1,000 bottles of Bordeaux over 4 years from Legend Cellars, a private storage facility, and just filled it with $2 Chuck, which is this cheap wine you get at Trader Joe's in the US.
And look, it reminded me, there was a number of years ago in Quebec. So Quebec, for those who might not know, Quebec is the largest maple syrup producers on the planet. And there literally was a heist. I think it was short of 20 million bucks Canadian worth of maple syrup being stolen. But these are massive fucking barrels of maple syrup. You can't just walk in there and just roll it away, right? You need a forklift. So same as that lady organizing a heist. They probably all walked away with a case of 12 bottles each, right? But you need to know where you're going to get it. You need to organize the whole thing, right? Which bottle is it? Where is it located? $300, $300,000. The bottle was locked, right? So it's not as straightforward as you'd think. But there are people with enough balls to just kind of go for it, I guess.
Well, some other great heists doing some research I found out about was there were thieves that went through the catacombs of Paris. So Paris has these old catacombs that you can actually take some tours of underneath the city. And they went through those and came up and stole 300 bottles for about $300,000. There were two semi trucks disappeared in Australia, which is a little bit like the maple syrup. I mean, kind of massive amounts of, I don't know how you hide that stuff. It's
how do you move it?
It's a bit crazy. And one of the most interesting ones is that in Bordeaux, there were 7 metric tons of grapes stolen.
Yeah.
And in Montagne, they dug up 500 vines. So there's even theft from the vineyard. What do you think is the most, if you could steal something from a vineyard, well, you could steal the name, you could steal the grapes. What do you think is the most valuable thing to steal? What's really the value in a wine?
Look, I think there's two ways to answer that question, right? There is to a winery, and you're talking about grapes being stolen. That's happened in California a number of times, where a small mums and pops winery would wake up one morning and the entire vineyard has been harvested overnight, right? And these guys, this is their livelihood, right? This is the most valuable thing they have at that moment, and it's irreplaceable, irrespective of insurance money, and this is irreplaceable. But I also think there's been a lot of discussions between France and China, Australia, China, and I think we've also seen a lot of brands being stolen, right? In a way that you would effectively find a wine in China with a certain label, but the content is not the proper wine. So there's a French winemaker, I can't remember his name, who actually went to China to look at opening the market in China. And he kind of went, hey, that's my wine on the shelves. And I never sold to anyone to import it to China. There's a producer that we worked with in Australia who shipped a container of wine in China, got stuck at the borders, and 3 months in, he just flew into China to sort of figure out what's happening. And he actually discovered there was far more of his wine than he'd shipped initially. So someone in the process copied every bottle and duplicated the product. And so I think stealing the brand is something that we're probably going to see increasingly. And consumers don't really have a way of knowing, even if there's a little seal of authenticity. You know, I think the brand is really easily sold. Sorry.
It's easy, but it's also, I think, to David's question, or to your question, David, I think it is probably, for the exact same examples that you give, Seb, probably one of the most valuable or potentially damaging things, because in your examples, it could potentially block your entrance to an entire market, and it could be building up there, creating more and more resistance without you ever knowing that it's happening, because one vintage is one vintage, but if you have an attachment to some other brand, or blocked, that could take years.
And it probably depends on the size of the business.
It does.
Right? So a smaller winery really need their product. A larger winery really need their brand, right? Because the damage is significant. But it's so fragmented that ultimately, a small winery having their brand sold in China, they're probably not going to see their bottom line change all that much.
Laurie, I mean, do wineries talk to you about their protection of their brand, or how they're positioning it, or how they're doing their labels or their imagery, or is it a topic on their minds?
I think it's like we're seeing, like a few more like of these like seals or innovative kind of seals that, like around the capsules. Also wines that are just, put on the blockchain. Like it's more, we've talked about that before. Like it's a bit more like riding the wave, of the moment, rather maybe more than protection. But not so much. Like I think it's just like mostly just like super premium wineries. And sometimes I find like those wineries, they just do very limited, and they just go directly auction. Like for one of the clients, like the setting, they just sent, it was a Magnum, I think, but it was like sold for like $1 million kind of thing, and going to a nonprofit as well. But they just like almost kind of like protect their very expensive wine by just really controlling where it goes and avoiding, I think, risky market. And as in my life as a designer, I've heard a bit of horror stories also with China, where a bit like Seb was saying, like you do 1 year and it all goes well, and then you're supposed to repeat, the same way, and then that's when hell breaks loose. Without being stereotypical, like it's just like their capacity of copying, however you want to call it, is actually quite fascinating, but dangerous as well. So it's more like my experience, what I've seen from where I stand.
I think copying a product scales more than stealing the actual physical goods.
Yeah, that thing. Yeah.
So no one is asked to sign each label in blood. No one is asked to try and. Who knows?
No. That's but it's just like quite fascinating. And again, I would be really curious. I wouldn't be surprised. I was joking earlier with Netflix, but like the top shows like Money Heist and all of that is, like it's just like really like all about heist. And it's just like I wouldn't be surprised if, I don't think there's an awareness of the general public that there is wine heist, and that wine is also an investment or something like that. Like watch my word, but I think by 2024 they would be brought more to the general public. But I think also like because it's rich people problems. Like, I don't think there's a lot of empathy whatsoever. I think the empathy in the general consumer would be when the vines are stolen. Like, it feels more heartbreaking. Like, it's just like, oh, it's a farmer, like all that work. Like, it's just like, oh, like rich people wine getting stolen. Boo-hoo. You know, like, it's just like, I think there's also like that potential issue.
Look, I'd be curious at the size of the industry on a global scale. I'd be curious to have a look at how much wine, what's the value of the overall wine fraud or wine heist, or how much wine is involved on a year-by-year basis in being stolen or fraudulent activities. I don't think it's a big problem. I don't think it's significant, right? It's probably tens, hundreds of millions in value, but I don't think it affects the broader population enough, or the market enough. So fascinating, though. I've never watched your Red Notice, and I've never watched Money Heist on Netflix either, so I don't know what
I watched Red Notice. I haven't watched Money Heist, but yeah, you can definitely skip Red Notice.
I normally skip
I think
whatever Netflix says is the most popular. I just skip it.
I think you touched upon something with Money Heist. There's this idea in the series that they give the money to the people.
Yeah.
Some kind of Robin Hood sort of thing, which is not, which, as you were saying, it's tough when people are stealing old bottles of wine, and it's like, who cares? This is a bit of a problem. So, yeah.
Awesome.
Great. Well, I think that's it for the Wine Tech Insiders podcast. I'd like to thank our Wine Tech Insiders, Seb from Troly, Jonathan from Bottlebooks, and Laurie from Oushinery. We'll see you all again in a few weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Catch you later.
Bye.
Cheers.